Hey everybody, this is Rykard here again, and welcome to my next Pokemon sets video, this time featuring Luxray. Today's video is going to have two sets for this Pokemon, one of which is a favorite set of mine to use with it, and another is one that I actually recently came up with that works incredibly well as a wall breaker in NU. So let's get started like we always do by taking a look at this Pokemon's typing, abilities, and stats. So to start things off, Luxray is a mono-electric type Pokemon introduced in Generation 4 and has received some very significant buffs once the 5th gen games rolled around, which is something that I actually went over in a much older upgrade video on this Pokemon. But as far as the abilities are concerned, the first one that it gets is known as Intimidate, which is an ability that lowers your opponent's physical attack every time you switch Luxray in. Now this ability can be very useful for not only providing defensive team support by lowering the damage output of your opponent's physical attackers, but it can also allow Luxray to take physical hits very well if you choose to EV it as such. As for its next ability is known as Rivalry, which is an ability that either increases or decreases your damage output depending on the gender of your opponent. If your opponent is the same gender as you, you will be able to actually increase all the damage by all the attacks you do by 25%, whereas if they are the opposite gender of you, you actually lower your damage output against them by 25%. So overall, it can be effective to give you some extra power. However, it is a little bit unreliable just because if your opponent is the opposite gender, you do lose a lot of potential KO power with this Pokemon. So it isn't necessarily the best ability to go with if you want to increase your damage output, but it can be effective even though it is a little bit unreliable. And its last ability is known as Guts, which is Luxray's Dream World ability, which increases your physical attack by one stage every time you are statused. And I believe this applies to every status. And one thing that I especially need to make note of is that this applies to Burn. It applies to Burn, everyone. It applies to Burn. Every single time I do a Guts Pokemon, somebody in the comments is like, but Burn lowers your physical attack. No, it doesn't with Guts. It increases your physical attack. That's it. No more explaining that. But anyways, Guts is arguably the best ability for Luxray to use from an offensive standpoint because it allows you to very easily increase your physical attack and increase your damage output from your physical side, which, as you're going to see in a second, can be very threatening. But the first thing I want to point out about this Pokemon's stats are that it actually has some very well-rounded defenses with 80 HP, 79 physical defense, and 79 special defense, meaning that this Pokemon is by no means frail, and also because of the Intimidate ability, you can also effectively run a defensive set on this Pokemon, even though it is typically seen as a physical attacker. Another thing to point out is the best thing about this bulk is that if you do want to run an offensive Luxray, you don't really have to worry about it like other potential physical or special attackers because of its nice bulk, or worry about it as much because it will actually be able to take a hit or two before it goes down, which is very useful for any offensive Pokemon, meaning that it increases its staying power and allows you to threaten your opponent for the remainder of the battle or for a very long time in battle because it's not going to go down so easily. But as far as the offensive stats are concerned, it has base 120 physical attack, which is a really, really nice physical attack, meaning that Luxray is capable of dishing out some massive damage from the physical side. It also has access to a very nice 95 base special attack, which means that if you want to run a special Luxray, you can do that as well. And the best thing about both of these offensive stats is that it actually has some very good moves in its move pool to make use of both a physical and special set, which is really cool and something that not a lot of Pokemon are able to do. They either have more towards one side or more towards the other. So it's really great that Luxray is able to do both very effectively. And lastly, it has a base 70 speed stat, which unfortunately is the only thing I think hindering Luxray from being a massive sweeper, due to the fact that the speed stat isn't really great for a sweeping Pokemon. However, it is good enough to outspeed a lot of walls that you might run into, which could turn you into a very good wall breaker, which is actually the last set that I have for you on this video. But for the first set, let's just jump into that right now, which, as I said before, is going to be a defensive set for Luxray that I really, really enjoy using. So for this first set, we're going to begin by giving Luxray a bold nature to increase its physical defense but lower its physical attack. And for the ability, we're going to be going with Intimidate as a way to lower our opponent's physical attack every time we switch Luxray in. As for the EVs, we're going to put 252 into our HP, 252 into our physical defense, and then 4 into our special attack to give us our max HP and max physical defense possible with the bold nature. And for the item, we're going to be going with Leftovers as a way to recover a little bit of HP at the end of every turn. But as far as the moves are concerned, the first thing that we're going to go with is Discharge, which is an 80 base power special electric move with a 30% chance to paralyze. Up next, we have Roar, which is a move that will phase opponents out, which can be very useful to prevent any baton pass teams from setting up all day or just racking up some extra entry hazard damage every time your opponent switches out if you do have Stealth Rock or Spikes or Toxic Spikes up. And then the last two moves on the set are going to be a combination of Rest and Sleep Talk. Rest is Luxray's only way to have any recovery on its HP outside of an item, so this will definitely increase its staying power, and Sleep Talk is obviously there to allow you to continue to be a threat from or while you are sleeping. So overall, the set is just very useful to provide some defensive support to your team. With Intimidate, Luxray is able to take pretty much any physical hit in the tier, barring a super effective hit, which is only really Earthquakes that you're going to have to worry about, or Earth Power, but it is very easy to know what Pokemon will have that, so you can easily switch out to avoid any unnecessary damage from those Pokemon. But overall, this is just kind of a similar set that I've shown you on other Pokemon. Discharge for Paralysis, once they're paralyzed, you can phase them out and just paralyze an entire team that way. Or you can obviously just roar things to get any entry hazard damage that you have up consistently as your opponent has to constantly switch out. And the great thing also about running Sleep Talk with Roar is that Sleep Talk negates the negative priority of Roar if you do Sleep Talk Roar, which is very useful if your opponent is already paralyzed because you can just continue to shuffle things all day around once you are asleep with Sleep Talk if you can Sleep Talk the Roar. But overall, I really, really love using this set for Luxray. It's my favorite Luxray set, and it can provide some really awesome team support, especially if you are into using slower Pokemon that would benefit significantly from the discharge paralyzing opponents. As for this next set, we're going to start by giving Luxray a Naive Nature to increase its speed but lower its special defense, and for the ability, we're going to be going with Guts. As for the EVs, we're going to put 104 into our physical attack, 240 into our special attack, and the remainder 164 EVs into our speed. Now with this with this EV investment, we're going to actually have some very nice physical and special attack with this Pokemon, also giving it enough speed to outspeed any Pokemon in the NU tier with up to base 100 speed that typically does not pack any speed investment. And this will allow you to outspeed every single wall in the NU tier, which is very useful because the set is meant to be a wall breaker. And just to give an example of a Pokemon with base 100 speed that typically doesn't pack any speed investment, that would probably be Miltank in that category, which is a Pokemon we want to easily be able to take down using this set. And for the item, we're either going to go with an Expert Belt or a Toxic Orb. However, this set was meant only with the Expert Belt in mind, so keep in mind that on the next slide when I show you some damage calcs, those will all be in mind with the Expert Belt item. However, if you do want to auto-induce your own Guts, which in my opinion is honestly not necessary with this set, you can run a Toxic Orb for an alternative option. However, Expert Belt is the option to go with in my opinion. But as far as the moves are concerned, and I will also explain all of these with some damage calcs in just a minute, the first one that we're going to go with again is Discharge to be your main special electric type move, also having that 30% chance to paralyze, which can come in handy to not only provide the team support that it will with the paralysis, but also potentially allow you to outspeed Pokemon that you would typically not be able to if they can switch in on a Discharge and take it fairly easily. But for the next move on the set, we're going to go with Hidden Powered Ice to provide you with some nice special attacking coverage with Discharge, because you get that whole Bolt Beam combo that is very sought after. And then for the physical side of this set, we're going to be going with Superpower and Crunch to give you some nice type coverage with these two moves, allowing you to two-hit KO a lot of walls that you're going to run into in NU. But to kind of give you a breakdown of these moves with the Expert Belt item and what Pokemon these moves are actually able to take out very easily, we're going to go over to another slide right now, which you're going to see right here, and I'm just going to tell you pretty much how the set works in wall breaking the majority of the NU tier. So as far as Discharge is concerned, it can one-hit KO Alomomola and Mantine after Stealth Rock, which is very useful, and it can also two-hit KO Torkoal, Golbat, Mandibuzz, Wartortle, and Weezing after Stealth Rock if they're running their typical sets, which is very important for this Pokemon because that is pretty much the majority of physical walls you run into in NU, and with this set, you can break them down very easily, allowing other Pokemon on your team to now sweep if they are physical attackers, such as like Scarfed fighting types such as Sawk or Primeape. As far as HP Ice is concerned, this allows you to two-hit KO Tangela and Vileplume after Stealth Rock, which is another thing that is very important for this set because those are other common walls that you're going to run into, Tangela being one of the most powerful physical walls in the tier, especially because of the Regenerator ability. Also, for Superpower, which is the first physical move on this set, this move can one-hit KO Bastiodon, Probopass, and Regice, which is very important because those are also Pokemon that you commonly see, along with being able to 2-hit KO Licky Licky, Miltank, and Audino after Stealth Rock. And as I said before, with the speed investment, we are able to outspeed Miltank, which is very useful to allow us to 2-hit KO it, because after superpower attacks, obviously, you do have the -1 physical attack, but it still is enough to finish off all 3 of these Pokemon after that -1 physical attack, as long as you are faster than all of them. But with Superpower, now with Guts activated, which is something that I put in purple on purpose to make note of the fact that this is Superpower with Guts, this allows you to 1-hit KO all the above normal types with the Expert Belt, along with being able to 1-hit KO Golem and Pileswine after Stealth Rock, which is again Pokemon that you very commonly see in the NU tier. And this Superpower also allows you to now 2-hit KO Regirock after Stealth Rock, which is the other very common Pokemon that sets up Stealth Rocks in the NU tier, and with Guts activated, it lands you a 2-hit KO. As far as Crunch is concerned, it allows you to 1-hit KO Gardevoir just flat out, which is really good because that's another common Pokemon you run into, and this is also taking into account Stealth Rocks. But with Guts activated, which is why Crunch is purple again, this allows you to 1-hit KO Golurk and Hypno after Stealth Rock, which is very important as well, and also to 2-hit KO both Misdreavus, Musharna, and Duosion after Stealth Rock, which is again Pokemon that you very, very commonly see in the NU tier. So overall, this set can just take down the majority of walls in NU, and if you predict correctly, it makes your job so much easier. However, Luxray, if it does have to stay in and take a hit, you know that it can, because as I said before, it isn't frail like most other attackers that you run into, because of its nice 80 HP and 79 physical and special defense. So it does have some staying power, which is why this Pokemon is very effective. But that is it for this video, everyone. So I hope you enjoyed this exhibition of 2 really awesome Luxray sets, and hope you give them a shot, because I really, really enjoy using both of them. But that is it for this video, everyone, as I just said. So as always, take care, goodbye, and I will see you all next time.